Welcome to the Making Nice with Naughty podcast, where we delve into the art of intimacy for the rule-following, organized, perfectionist, practical, and color within the line types. I'm your co-host, Dr. Tom Murray, a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex therapist, and the author of the book that started it all.
Hi, I'm Dr. Frances Robbins, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. My background includes a master's degrees in nursing and international health, along with a doctorate in business administration. We're here to explore the world of intimacy in a way that resonates with even the most structured and detailed-oriented individuals.
In Making Nice with Naughty, we uncover the secrets to navigating intimacy for those who thrive on rules, order, and perfectionism.
Join us as we discuss practical insights, expert advice, and personal stories that will guide you through the journey of connecting intimately while staying true to your organized and rule-following nature.
Whether you color within the lines or prefer a perfectly outlined plan for everything, we've got you covered.
So buckle up and get ready to explore the fascinating world of intimacy. With us, Making Nice with Naughty is not just a podcast. It's your guide to a fulfilling and organized love life.
This is Making Nice with Naughty. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Making Nice with Naughty podcast. I'm Dr. Tom Murray.
I'm Frances Robbins, Dr. Robbins.
So glad to see you again, Frances, for another week.
Yeah, I just enjoy our time together so much. And I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about today. You know, last time we met, we were talking about different anxieties and just all that, how anxiety is friend and foe, maybe a frenemy. But today we're diving into chapter 8 of your book, Making Nice with Naughty, and it's entitled Taming the Monkey. So Tom,
Yes.
What's the monkey?
The mind chatter. And that metaphor of taming the monkey really comes from that Buddhist notion, you know, that there's the monkey mind, you know, and they can just be there dancing along and being very distracting and sometimes humorous, but sometimes just a real big pain in the ass.
Yes. I have to tell you a little monkey story. So when Keith and I, my husband and I, were in India, the monkeys are not, they're kind of a nuisance in India where we were at. And just like in the city where we live now, like raccoons can be a nuisance, right? They get in your trash or whatever. But there was all these monkeys. Of course, we're not accustomed to seeing monkeys.
That's right.
You know, it's almost like in the States, crows, right? Or something that's like annoying.
Squirrels and stuff?
Yeah, like a squirrels.
Uh-huh.
But in India, there's monkeys everywhere. And what our guide was like, oh, there's a naughty monkey. I thought, oh, that's just too funny. So when I saw the chapter on taming the monkey, I thought, ooh, that's a naughty monkey. You know? So I can see the analogy of the mind chatter, Well,
Yes.
So if you've got all this mind chatter, which I think most people would know what that means, but it's basically all those thoughts, right? That you come in and out and zip around and just fill our head. Is that right?
That's right. And another way of describing it is the inner narrator of your life. That voice in your head that describes things as good, bad, right, wrong, comfortable, uncomfortable, just, unjust, all of those kinds of judgments that occur from a moment-to-moment basis that the mind has a tendency to do. That's what I'm referring to when using the metaphor of the monkey mind.
And I would like to say that everybody has it to some degree or another. And to me, it's about learning how to control that, which we're going to be talking about, but that it doesn't necessarily mean when it happens to you, doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And that you need to go tootle off to see, Frances Robbins, psychiatric nurse practitioner, and get medication.
Right.
Right? Now, sometimes people do experience auditory hallucinations. They hear voices that no one else hears. They see things that no one else sees. That's different.
That's different in part because you know that you are you know that the voice is creation of your own mind. Whereas people who have auditory hallucinations, they don't make the distinction between self-generated internal dialogue and dialogue that they experience as being coming in from the outside. In the severe case, could be someone who thinks that a radio transistor has been put into a cavity, and that's why that they hear, voices from the CIA or something like that.
Correct. And if you're somebody out there that's kind of experiencing that, absolutely come and see Frances Robbins, psychiatric nurse practitioner. But today we're talking about just the conversations that you have with yourself.
Yes, and particularly, if I may, particularly conversations that you have with yourself that feel heavy.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Oh, yes. I have to pat myself on the back. So I had a situation this past week since we've seen each other. We do these weekly. So last time we saw each other, I had a situation where I just had the heaviest thought. And I had this, I don't need to go into details, but it was kind of like doom and gloom, right? And I was just, oh, that's such a heavy thought. And I thought about you, Tom. And I thought, well, Tom said, if it's a heavy thought, it's not real. It's not true. It's not a truthful thought. And just knowing that, and then knowing what we've been talking about, it really helped give me some resolution. And off I went on to something else. And I didn't give that heaviness any validity, any credit. I was like, whatever. It's a heavy thought. Yeah. Well, Tom, one thing I did want to ask you. So you told me about what the monkey is. It's the mind chatter. And I told you my little story about India, the monkeys in India. Those monkeys do not calm down. They are boop, 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 until they're asleep or eating. That's about the only time they were, calm. How do we calm down this monkey?
Well, there's a number of ways of doing it. Some that we've already talked about in prior episodes. So, for example, the Byron Katie method of the work, right? That when you have a distressing thought, it is best to actually engage the thought through inquiry, through asking questions. So, for example, your stressful thought that you had this prior week, it can be helpful to engage the question as you did. And then if you wanted to even go a step further, you might ask the questions of those turnarounds. Like, what is the opposite of the thought that I was having? And there's often three, sometimes fewer, but there's insights to be gleaned when you engage in the process of inquiry. So certainly that's one technique that we've already covered so far. The other one is mindfulness. Mindfulness, which is certainly a buzzword that we often hear, is as Jon Kabat-Zinn says, is the awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally, in the service of self-understanding and wisdom. And that non-judgmentally is so very important, that you are the observer of the mind rather than a participant in what the mind is producing, that you're observing it. Oh, I see, that's my mind chatter. I'll give you an example. Okay. Years ago, I was engaging in some cannabis use, and my feet are propped up on the coffee table, right? And I had the sensation that my feet were falling through the coffee table. I can imagine that if someone is prone to paranoia, they might get anxious about that, scared, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I distinctly remember just having the ability to be aware of the thought of my feet are falling through the coffee table. And so it was just something that I could notice rather than react to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love this. You say this in your book. I even wrote it down. This should be cross-stitched, I think. You are not the content of your mind. That is very powerful.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know if you remember writing that, but you did. You are not the content of your mind, and the reason I love that, and I'm gonna use that when I'm talking to my patients, is to be able to. People get caught up in thinking that because they're having the thought, it is true. They they can catastrophize or
Hmm.
have this excessive worry that happens, and they have this, there's a belief, because we believe what's in our mind so much, that that's what defines them, right? That's who they are. But they are not that. They are
We are
not
not.
that.
We are not the
Mm-mm.
mind chatter. To even stretch that a little bit further,
Mm-hmm.
Martin Seligman, who is a world famous psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
and was the first to discover a animal model of depression in the 70s, right? And he developed a term called learned helplessness.
Oh yeah.
And later he published and republished a book called Learned Optimism. And in what he discovered is that optimism and pessimism are two explanatory styles. In other words, when good and bad things happen in our life,
Mm-hmm.
we explain them in ways that are more optimistic or more pessimistic. And in our culture, unfortunately, we got into a terrible habit of framing optimism as good, pessimism as bad, when in fact, it really is context dependent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like OC, being over controlled in certain contexts is good, and in other contexts can be bad. What he found, though, is that the explanatory style that we adopt is highly correlated to the explanatory styles of our primary caregivers as children.
Oh yeah.
And so for most people, that is our mothers, right? That
Mm-hmm.
our mothers. So if
Mm-hmm.
our mothers are particularly optimistic, then we tend to adopt that explanatory
Mm-hmm.
style, just as if our mothers are particularly pessimistic. Now, my mother was particularly pessimistic. And I know that my default setting, my mind chatter, my monkey mind,
Mm-hmm.
is defaulted to a pessimistic setting. And in many areas of my life, that certainly has served me. In other areas of my life, it's been a liability. So there is a way that you can take the learned optimism test, right? And it will give you a sense of what is the dance that your dancing monkey, what's the tune that your dancing monkey plays to? Does it play to an optimistic tune, or does it play to a pessimistic tune?
Mm-hmm.
Just to give listeners a way of becoming a little bit more curious about the
Mm-hmm.
default settings of their mind, so that they can better be able to observe it with purpose, non-judgmentally.
I think that's great. So, in context with making ice with naughty, the we're talking about maybe that mind chatter, that monkey brain happening in the midst of intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
or pre-intimacy, or post-intimacy. Right? It's like, there, especially with the over controlled. And
I had,
I just wonder
yeah.
if you could we talk more? Could you kind of expand on that? Like maybe help people identify when they're experiencing that in their moments of intimacy?
Yes. So even today, I had a client who has begun reading the book, in fact, and has identified with the examples. And their observation was to ask questions about their sexual performance with their partner is anxiety inducing. It makes them feel awkward, right? They feel awkward when they talk about sex. And so what do? They avoid talking about sex.
Hmm.
And the cost of that, of course, is that they don't learn how to become an even more proficient sexual partner with this
Mm-hmm.
particular person
Mm-hmm.
because they have closed themselves off to receiving feedback. Even
Mm.
though their partner is more than willing to give feedback,
Oh yeah.
but has learned that when they gave feedback, they the person experiences it as I'm not doing a good enough job. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
doing this right. So they internalize it
Mm-hmm.
in a way that prevents them from actually cultivating that more fulfilling and meaningful sex life.
I was just thinking as you were talking, I am so grateful that when I my first sexual experience was in high school. I think like 99% of the people in the world. And I had a boyfriend who I just loved. I
Mm.
just loved, and I believe he loved me, and as teenagers do. But it was such a wonderful exploratory experience that we were both so uh, willing in our vulnerabilities, and it was really an exploration of the body
Mm.
in a setting that was a little probably like we're trying to be sneaky around, but I'll tell you, I really appreciate now as an adult person, I really appreciate that time because it helped me to have a very positive
Mm.
awareness of self, and then also my understanding how my, in this case, a male partner is receptive, and the things that are important, or that in essence kind of like turn somebody on, right? But learning all that, but being able to do that in a safe community, like I say community, it was just one guy, but being able to do that safely.
Yeah.
I will never say his name on air, but if I knew like he was passed away and I could say his name on air, I would say it, because he was so good. He was
Oh.
so good. And he was a virgin too. And so together we were able to kind of discover things, but our relationship lasted for several years. It lasted until we went off to college. But I really, if I wish I could say his name just to thank him,
Yeah.
but I don't want to
Well,
embarrass him or his kids or whatever, or his now wife or partner. So I won't, but there
well,
you are.
how did your early childhood experiences around conversations around sex and sexuality set the stage
Oh
for
yeah.
that? In other words,
Yeah. Well,
how was you?
I was the product, right? So my parents, I have an older brother who's 10 years older than I am. And my mother was in her early 40s, and my father was in his late 40s when I was born. So the joke between, in the family or my brother was I was the bathroom baby. And it was years before I figured out what the heck he was talking about. So my parents had a moment where they came together, and there's Frances, not planned. So as I was growing up, my mother was a very industrious. She was very much into women's liberation and equal rights for women, and very important to her that I do not become a nurse or a teacher. Right? I needed to do something else, because that's what women did. If they weren't married, their job was to be a nurse or a teacher. So she worked a lot, and she was gone frequently. And my father was in the military and was gone frequently. And then when he was retired, he worked typically swing shift. So I didn't really see him very much. So my brother tells me that I was kind of a feral kid, hopelessly optimistic, completely unaware of the problems that may be around me. Just not even, just hopelessly optimistic, not really understanding danger or worry or whatever. And so I guess I was raised by kind neighbors who made sure that, I was dressed nice for picture day, that I had a place to go after school, that kind of stuff. And I guess it really was the community of people. I wouldn't say it was any particular religious group we were active in a congregation that is very stoic and very rule driven, and not a lot of affection, but I was an affectionate person. But I don't even know how that happened in the family that I lived in. So it's very interesting. I would assume that I have people that were, neighbors, people in my life that I latched onto, and that they just kind of took care of me. So
Yeah.
I don't really know. I wouldn't say that my parents were good or bad. They kept me fed. They kept a roof over my head, that kind of thing. But I didn't really. And then my father died when I was 15. And so during that whole time of kind of like learning about yourself or whatever, he had died. And then my mom just continued to be very separate. So it was a very odd, I guess, you don't know when you're living it that it's odd,
Yes.
but I would just say that the neighborhood raised me.
Well, it also sounds though that how, maybe this is a leap, but when left to your natural devices, you naturally develop a healthy a relationship to sex and sexuality.
Sure.
That when it's not being, when your natural impulses or natural, well, let me say it differently. I don't think we're brought into the world having a negative view of sex and sexuality, that is programmed in us. And so when you're free of that, I imagine that you're able to have the kinds of experiences that you described.
Yeah. And I would tell you, in just thinking about that first relationship, right? That one that you're just like, oh, I'd write his name on my notebook 1,000,000 times. And it's like everything I did was all about that. But what I would say is that I'm so thankful to the universe, to those around me, that relationship grew and cultivated, and that I wasn't spiraled into a relationship that would have skewed my thoughts of sex or made fun of me or belittled me. Right. So really that, if I could say his name, I'd say his name. But I would just really, if I have no idea where this guy is now in life, but it would be so cool to be able to send him a little message. Thanks for the great sex.
Well, all the listeners are now really wanting to know who this Don Juan is.
Well, I would tell you that I would like to think, I'd like to think that the majority of folks have that experience, but maybe they haven't. That
Yeah.
that could have been something just kind of serendipitously laid in my lap. But I am so thankful for that experience because that helped me to go on and have a sexual confidence that
Mm,
that now I share with my husband, and a lot of the feelings that could have happened through like an over controlled mind, or just fear that come around with intimacy. I just don't have it because I really believe that early on, when it first happened, that was such a positive experience,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Kudos to both of you.
Hmm. We were having sex all the time, like a bunch, all the time. It didn't even matter. It was
Well,
great.
it's fun. It's fun. Yeah. Yeah.
The good thing was that we were both underage. So when the police would find us, we would just show our ID. Are you safe? Yes, I'm safe. Are you doing this under your will? And he would say like, no, I'm not doing this under my will. Okay, well, you guys can't be like in the bushes here. You got to move on.
Oh dear, I love it. I love it. Hello there, dear readers. I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the release of the Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, narrated by yours truly. As the author, I've poured my heart and soul in telling your story, especially how your psychological temperament shows up in the bedroom and how it gets in the way of intimacy. With every sentence, every emotion, I'm right there with you, guiding you through getting more meaning and fulfillment in your sexual and intimate relationships. The wait is over. You can now download the audiobook on Audible or from my website, drtommurray.com, and immerse yourself in where you reclaim the playfulness of your sexuality. My voice is your compass as you navigate through every titillating moment, gaining powerful insights from psychology. Claim your aha moment. Click on the link and join me on this unforgettable journey toward making nice with Naughty. Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, available on Audible. Download now. Mm. 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 Slowing down. A lot of people can relate to this. They may be hyper productive, and they might eat lunch at their desk, and they're responding to emails and texting or whatever, and then they're like, they look down and they see that they are 3/4 of the way through their meal, or they've completed their meal, but have very little memory of eating it, very little memory of actually enjoying the food that they're eating. And that's the crux of it, is that the nature of the mind is specifically designed to be distracting us from the present moment. So you'll recall that the mind tends to focus on past or future, and the dramas of that. So whether it's drama in the past or anticipated drama in the future, and when we become identified with those thoughts, then we lose the possibility to enjoy what the present moment has to offer. And these exercises, whether it's with the raisin or with the chocolate kiss, is a way to pull you back into the present moment, utilizing your senses, because that is a anchor into the present moment. I'm going to just focus on what I can smell, taste, touch, hear, and see, that pulls you into the present moment. And so that's the importance of these kinds of exercises, because for a lot of people, when they have sex, they're not present with it. They're thinking about that laundry list of stressors that are waiting for them afterward, that they tell themselves, gosh, sex is just another job that I have to do, right? And they're not enjoying it. I had a conversation earlier with a client, and they were talking about mutual masturbation, and that they don't get anything out of just watching their partner masturbate. And so then the question is that if you're going to participate in an experience such as mutual masturbation, and maybe your partner takes a lot longer to reach orgasm, and so you're just there waiting, in essence. Well, if you're going to wait anyway, what do you have to do to make that waiting experience more enjoyable to you? Right? Bringing yourself back into the present moment. Otherwise, if you're just lying there thinking, oh, these things that I rather wish I could do in the future, is a recipe to build resentments. And then that robs you even more of a peace of mind. It cultivates more suffering instead. Yes. Mm. Certainly. So this method comes out of, well, let's first go back to the concept of your mind as a tool. When you're experiencing a thought and that thought is stressful, that is your mind using you as a tool. When you have a thought and the thought is neutral, such as, let's say, planning, that is you using your mind as a tool. So mind chatter, or that inner voice that you hear when you're thinking, isn't inherently, as you said earlier, it's not inherently bad. Right? That's the gift of having this prefrontal cortex, is that we can have the capacity to plan. We have executive functioning capabilities. And so when you're thinking about plans or goals, etc., and they're relatively neutral in their execution, fine. Right? That's when you're using your mind as a tool. But when you have thoughts that are heavy, stressful, irritating, anxious, that's your mind using you as a tool. And so then when you're wanting to bring yourself back into presence, you're tapping into those sensory experiences. And so in the example, you would look at identify 5 things that you can see, right? Like, I see my microphone, I see Dr. Francis, I see my computer, etc. And then 4 things that you could physically feel. I can feel my computer, I can feel my desk, I can feel my microphone. 3 things that you can hear, and then 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And so you're going through that as a way to bring your focus back into the present moment, knowing that mind chatter might be there, right? Because mind chatter isn't, people will often say, I just don't want to think anymore. Boo Bear, that's not how the mind works, right? The mind's job is to create thought. Your job is to decide which thoughts you're going to buy. Are you going to be a compulsive buyer and buy every thought that the mind produces? Are you going to be a selective buyer and buy the thoughts that are moving you in the direction you want to go? Hmm. Yes. Yes. That's right. Um, uh, it can be, part of mindfulness is asking yourself questions such as, in this moment, is my heart space open to my partner? So just simply asking that question requires you to go inside. Is my heart space open to my partner? And if the answer is no, then proceed with caution, because the outcome is likely to be unfavorable. And whatever you do, however you're showing up, if you don't proceed with caution, you might end up doing things that are going to lead to more distress. If your heart space is closed, but you want to open it, the loving kindness meditation can be really helpful. And I use Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun. She uses the statement, may you be free of suffering and the root of suffering. May you enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. And was he like, boy, that Tom is such a weirdo. What the hell is he doing? Who are you thinking of when you? You better been thinking of me. Yeah, yeah. Well, you're very welcome, and ultimately the goal of the loving kindness meditation is to certainly extend that out to the universe and to people that you may feel particularly close to, and even people that you feel has been acted wrongly against you. It's also important to extend that to yourself. May I be free of suffering in the root of suffering, and may I enjoy happiness in the root of happiness. And for some people, particularly if they have a mind chatter, that is particularly critical, shaming, they may struggle with extending that kind of love to themselves, which is all the more reason. Where I extend this in the book is talking about love, and that your existence, the fact that you get to exist in this moment, is a miracle. I mean, when we think that since the beginning of time, these atoms have been were blew out, right, at the Big Bang, and have been traveling forever throughout time and space. And in this moment, when I mean this moment, I mean for the course of your lifetime, these atoms coalesced to a person that we get to call Francis.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I know.
To me,
I know.
that is amazing.
I know. I agree. And when in medicine and in nursing, when you're studying anatomy and physiology and you see the intricacies, it even makes it even more amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Just because there's a lot of us out there in the world doesn't take away from our awesomeness.
Right. And this is I just read this the other maybe a month ago, that we can calculate based on the genome how many possible variations of different humans that there could be. The number of possibilities is so large that we can. There are many more people who could be born than have ever been born, and that the probability is that humans will become extinct long before we even get close to that maximum number of people who could ever be born. So the point that was being driven home is how lucky we are that we get to be, we hit the jackpot.
Yeah, I agree. Now, another thing that you bring up in the book that I wanted to ask about is if we could spend a little bit of time on rain. And RAIN stands for recognition, acceptance, investigation, and non-identification. I would really appreciate if you could just kind of go into that a little bit for me this morning.
Yeah. So, like you said, this metaphor of rain comes from a Buddhist psychologist named Dr. Jack Kornfield, and he came up with this way of this method for integrating mindfulness into your daily practice. And the first one, as you mentioned, is recognition. And what we're aiming to do is to recognize the moment that's happening. What is going on around us? Recognizing that you're having mind chatter in that moment, right? I am thinking. As soon as you have that awareness, I am thinking, you have entered into a state of enlightenment. As soon as you have the thought, I am thinking, You have entered a state of enlightenment. Why? Because you are recognizing you are not the thought that you're having. You are the observer of that thought, right? So just aware of, I'm not present right now. My mind has taken me somewhere else. Recognizing that. So when you're making love, when you're having sex, and you're realizing, oh, I'm not thinking about this moment, I'm thinking about some other moment. That's hugely important and a real step forward, I think, in the making nice with naughty process. The other element is acceptance, right? The accepting the reality of the moment. Earlier I talked about the mindfulness is a state of non-judgmentalness, right? Accepting is part of that. And not arguing with reality. I wish it were different. Why couldn't we? It should be more like this. It must be like this. I have to have it this way. When you're arguing with reality, you're of course setting yourself up for more suffering. Acceptance isn't resignation. I want to underscore. It's just that this is the reality that I'm living in, right? And then we moved into investigate with thoughtfulness. What is happening inside of me? Earlier, we talked about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method to bring you kind of closer to that process, and we used we reminded listeners of the Byron Katie the work, right? So you may just begin asking yourself questions. What most wants my attention in this moment, right? If you're having sex, it's like, well, what? This may be a strange question to ask oneself, but what does my vulva want in this moment? Right?
Right.
You would not be surprised by this, but a lot of women feel so detached from their genitalia that they don't even feel like it's a part of them. Right? They talk about it as if it's a separate part of themselves. Right? So seeing that this, questioning those thoughts of is this a separate part of me? Right? What does my body want? What would make my body feel good in this moment? Right? So you're investigating those. And then the last part is, to not identify yourself with the moment. So non-identification, that this moment is not who I am, but I am the observer of this moment. So that's self as context. I am the observer. Even if I don't get an erection, and everything in my mind chatter now is telling me, oh, I'm less of a man, I'm a terrible lover, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to observe those thoughts rather than get sucked into it. It's kind of like watching a movie. When you're at the movie theater, you're watching a movie up on the screen. You know that you're not an actor in the movie, right? But it seems like when the mind starts to go crazy with all of these vivid thoughts, we tend to think of ourselves being in the movie when we're simply observers of it.
Right.
That, this, despite what my mind may be telling me, I am not limited to the story of my mind. To give you an example, our past doesn't define us. We define our past. And I talk a little bit more about this in a later chapter on trauma. But if I believe that my past defines me, then that will impact how I show up in
Absolutely.
relationships.
Absolutely. So interesting. So interesting. Will you close out this chapter with your flexible fantasy? And I'd like to take just a few moments and again do this plug that you need to write a journal, Tom. How many times do you reference a journal in this book? It's amazing to me. So in our non Tom Murray journal, we write out our flexible fantasy, and you give some really good kind of prompts. Really, you kind of get people thinking about that, and you close the chapter with your flexible fantasy. I know that I've been asking you 1,000 questions today, but do you mind just kind of giving us an overview of that flexible fantasy and what's okay to write, what's not? Do you write it? Or you just kind of, could you just do an audio of it? Or is it, does it have to be in a certain way? You know, the over controller is going to want to know the rules, right?
Yeah. I think that putting things down on paper has just a more of a transformative experience, and so, I do press that people have a journal, that they're writing down these thoughts so that they're not in the mind. It's amazing, when the monkey mind is really active. By putting it on paper, you're in essence letting the mind know, oh, you don't have to repeat that thing anymore because it's been written down. And so it can have a quieting sentiment. So I sometimes will tell people, take a piece of paper and draw an outline of a head. And go ahead and write these things down that inside the head that your mind is telling you repeatedly what's going to happen, or the worries, or the past, or whatever. And you just put it down, because then you can remind yourself, oh, I don't have to play this song again. It's written down if I want to revisit it.
Yeah.
So in crafting your flexible fantasy, the first question that I pose is, what does your mind say you have to have happen before you can enjoy sex? Such as the example is, the kitchen has to be clean before I can have sex. Or sex can only happen on weekends, so it must be a weekend before I have sex. Or I have to have an erection first before I have sex. So getting very clear on what your mind chatter is trying to convince you must exist relative to your thoughts, your partner's behavior, or your environment.
Okay.
And then we go into this idea of in essence, really questioning those rules, right? The value of those rules. The mind is with the OCs in particular, doesn't like uncertainty. Right, so they want to have certainty, and so they think, oh, if the dishes are clean, I will more certainly have an enjoyable sexual experience, right? But what that does, of course, is it limits your options. And ironically, what do a lot of OCs think would help them feel safer? Having options. Right? Well, the option is, I can have the dishes clean, or I don't have to have the dishes clean. I can still have a good time. The other piece with this is, and we talked about this a little bit with REBT, is let's say you were able to enjoy yourself even though that rule wasn't fulfilled. Well, what would you have had to say to yourself to make it easier for you to enjoy yourself? And that may be, my preference would be to have the dishes washed, but I don't need to have the dishes washed in order to have a good sexual experience. My preference would be not to be awkward during sex, but I can tolerate awkwardness and still have a good time with my partner.
It's definitely a journey, isn't it? It's definitely a journey. And as we're traveling through Making Nice with Naughty and going through each one of these chapters, it seems like we're getting into kind of the anxiety, the mind chatter, those things. And also what I really appreciate about your writings, Tom, is that you offer solutions that people can use and lots of different solutions that people can use in whatever works best for them. I just encourage folks as they're going through this that if they do need professional guidance, to reach out to a sex therapist, talk to somebody who knows about this. This is not something that you would go to, a talk therapist or a supportive therapist, or you're just not going to necessarily get the best solutions. And I think you just bring so much to the table, Tom, when you talk about your profession and what you do. And there's professional folks that can help people who are struggling through this. I was told many, many years ago by a mentor to never struggle alone. Never struggle alone. And I really think about that with this podcast and this book. This podcast to me is just kind of bringing another step of awareness to people, but I wouldn't expect someone to go through this podcast with us and be and have resolution. I just wouldn't. I really think that part of that self-love, part of that seeking help, that's part of being the vulnerable OC person and going to the right place to find that. And it would definitely be ideally with you. I don't know what your availability is like or not, but ideally with you. But if not, then definitely a certified sex therapist for sure. Right.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that. And certainly listeners who are interested in finding a certified sex therapist, they can do that through the ASECT, which stands for the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, their website at asect.org. And there's a search function there to find a sex therapist in their communities.
Perfect.
Before we end, I'm certainly aware that our next chapter is on trauma, and that chapter can be particularly heavy for some people. And so, as you're listening and you're getting prepared, come with a lot of self-care and also an open mind as we delve into Chapter 9, Victim to Victorious.
I agree. It's just that we want to make sure that people are in a good space and maybe they practice some loving kindness meditation.
For sure. As always, Dr. Francis, such a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to next time.
Thank you, Tom. I as well.
And that wraps up another episode of Making Nice with Naughty. We hope you enjoyed our exploration of intimacy for the rule-following and organized.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found our discussions helpful or intriguing, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.
Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the podcast. Plus, it lets us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future episodes.
Have questions or you want to share your experiences? Connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Links on the description.
And for more in-depth insights, be sure to grab a copy of my book, Making Nice with Naughty, available on Amazon and Audible for the audiobook.
Thank you again for spending time with us. Remember, you can be both organized and adventurous in matters of the heart.
Until next time, keep making nice with naughty. To renew your passion
and ignite your desires.